Welcome to the wonderful world of wine. We are your hosts, Mark Lenzi and Kim Simone, exploring all things wine with you. Our program is supported by Franklin Public Radio, and you can find us on our website, thewww.wine. Hello again, everybody, and welcome to the wonderful world of wine. How are you, Kim?
I'm doing well. Mark, how are you?
Everything is great. Every
Good.
week we explore all things in the wine world with everybody. And today we have a very special guest. Alessia Botturi is here. She's joining us from Italy. Welcome. Thank you for the time.
Hi, Mark and Kim. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for being here. Alessia is an Italian wine educator. She is a sommelier. She was the co-founder of the North American Sommelier Association, and she's partner in a very great Italian website for education, yourpartnersinwine.com. So welcome to the show. And can you please start out by just telling our listeners a little bit about your wine career and how you started it, and your focus is on Italian wine and how that all came about?
Sure. So let's go back a few years. I was born and raised in Milan, Italy. That's basically where I started really getting into wine. I mean, wine in Italy, it's a little bit part of our lifestyle. It's part of my growing up. It's part of really everything. After college, I started to become a little bit more serious about my wine studies. After my studies in college, I took my sommelier certification. I just wanted to, maybe have a switch of career, focus a little bit more in wine. So that's just how it started, a little bit more for curiosity, a little bit for, just interest. So I went through my sommelier studies. That was 2006 when I finished. And in 2006, instead of starting really a career in wine in Italy, I decided to move to the United States. And in 2006, I packed up everything and I moved to California, Los Angeles, California. There, I was, it was like a little bit the beginning of all this like wine certifications in US. I remember back in 2006, I was one of the very few Italian certified sommelier in Los Angeles. So it was really easy for me to find a job right away. And I started working for this little wine importer. And from there, I also opened the first branch of what was the Italian Sommelier Association in Los Angeles. We started doing classes on Italian wines. We had this program called Italian Wine Specialist, where we were teaching everything about Italy, all the regions of Italy. And also we started teaching our sommelier certification that was certified by the Italian Sommelier Association here. That was a fun adventure. And then in the meantime, while I was doing sommelier courses, running around the country, teaching Italian wines, I was also working for some big Italian companies as well. I worked several years for Chateau Saint Michel, who was importing Antinori wines. And then from the Antinori wines, I went working for Gallo company that had a division where they were importing some really special Italian wines as well. And that's what's about almost 20 years of my life, of my career in wine. And then at a certain point, I decided that California was enough. And I decided to move back to Italy, and I choose to move back to Tuscany. I'm currently living in Florence. I've been here for a little bit over a year. And the idea here when I moved back was to start my own education program. And that's what I'm doing. I have my website. I launched my first course on Italian wine laws, because it's one of the most difficult topics for people when they start learning Italian wines, is to understand all these difficult laws like pan out and how Italian wines are really structured. So that's what I'm been focusing on for the past year. And in the meantime, I also teach wine to American students who come here to Florence, and they want to learn more also about Italian wine. So I guess my career is really really focus on Italian wines at this point.
But you've had a very broad career. It seems like you've got restaurant experience. You've got all your certifications. We've got all the importer parts that you've done, and you can be very appealing for both Italian learners and English speaker learners because you've got that going for you too. So what a varied career it seems you've had.
Thank you. Thank you, Kim.
I was going to ask, since you had been here in the States for a couple of decades, and your SOM certification is from an Italian institution. And when we talk about sommelier certifications in the United States, we talk about the Court of Master Sommeliers. And I was wondering what you felt were the main differences between the certification that you went through and what you have experienced with American SOMs and people who've gone through the program here in the United States.
Yeah, that's a great question because they have two completely different philosophies, I would say. The biggest difference is that for us here in Europe, to become a sommelier, you have to go through the entire curricula. So it's basically set in 3 levels, and each level is dedicated to a different topic. Let's say the first level is about wines. The second level is about the areas of the world. And the third level is about wine and food pairing. So only after the end of your entire curricula, you get the sommelier certification.
Okay.
While with the court, we know that you can become like a certified sommelier, and then there is the advanced, but you are a sommelier with only a short course with the court. So for us, it's a different approach. Mm-hmm. And I think also what makes us different is this third level of food and wine pairing, which is really part of our heritage. And we consider it so important to be like, I don't know how many hours of lecture are the third level. It's probably like 30, 40 hours of lecture only on food and wine pairing.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I work at a wine school and we don't do any of the court curriculum. We do the Wine and Spirit Education Trust and a couple of other things. And people ask us all the time, like, what is the difference between either Master Somm or an MW, or why should I take your course instead of doing the court and become a sommelier? And we tend to tell people that it's the difference between just knowing a whole lot about wine versus service in a restaurant and those pairings. So I think it's interesting to hear your perspective from what the Italian system is, where there is so much more of this emphasis on food and wine pairings, which to my brain makes so much sense because Italian wine and Italian food. But I also have to say that having been to Italy recently, the service component is so like ingrained in when you go out to a restaurant, and even not even a super fancy restaurant in Italy, the service component is always there. So whether it's food service or whether it's wine service, it is impeccable, I have to say. And I probably would say that Italy's way of doing that type of certification must have an impact on how service is raised to such a level in Italy.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And the funny thing is that I think, I mean, in some extent, they teach service at the sommelier course, but not as much as the court. At the end, you have almost the same result. I think a service is almost like elegance, in the gestuality and in presenting the wine, the passion that the sommelier has. I think it's really ingrained in our culture.
Yeah. And like the customer service, like how you relate to the person that dining with you. Yeah.
Correct. This kind of aspect of being welcoming to the guests.
Alessia, I wanted to ask you about the North American Sommelier Association. I had the pleasure of taking the Italian specialist program way back. And at the time, it was like one of the first programs out there that was focusing on Italian wine. Is it still an active society? And was that what gave you kind of the background to launch your program? Because something like that is no longer around, that type of program?
Yeah, that's unfortunately, that's a project fell apart a little bit. Let's say there were too many chefs in the kitchen. So unfortunately, we weren't able to make things work right. And that's also why I want to kind of focus again campaign on the education, because I think I really have so much to give, and trying other opportunities, to educate people on Italian wines at this point more independently, but giving the same level of quality that we were giving with the North American Sommelier Association.
It was a great class. It really was. It was.
Where did you take it?
I took it with Diego and Chiro here in Boston.
Oh, yeah.
God, it must be 10 years maybe now.
Yeah,
It was a
yeah.
while.
Yeah, it was a fantastic program, very successful. That's unfortunately not all of the great ideas keep going.
Well, you took it over. I mean, you mentioned you like to giving so much, and I wanted to tell our listeners that if they go to your website, the yourpartnersinwine.com, one of the things you offer is a free guide to Italian wine regions, and I was really impressed with the quality of that download that you offer for free. It's every region in Italy, and you give great information about it. You want to talk a little bit about that and what listeners can see when they download that?
Yeah, absolutely. So being Italian and having seen, how Americans perceive Italian wine, most of the focus that we always have are on most important regions like Tuscany, Piedmont, Sicily. But we always forget that we really have 20 regions in Italy, and they all have incredible wines. So my idea was to create a comprehensive course that give really in-depth information of every single region, so that people can really start exploring and understanding how much diversity we have in Italy. So when you download the guide, you basically have an incredible resource of information that is divided region by region. For every single region, you have details of the geography, of what makes that region unique from like a soil and weather perspective, and also what are the unique grape varietals that you can find in those regions that you don't find anywhere else. And also there is a comprehensive list of the most important DOCG or DOC of the region. So it's really like a great manual to have as a resource, and just go back to it every time you want to discover something new about Italy, or even like if you don't know about a region, you can start exploring and then look for a wine online and find it and try a new wine and have the reference, of this guide to the region.
You're listening to The Wonderful World of Wine, and we are your hosts, Kim and Mark. We are sponsored by Franklin Public Radio, and you can find us and our past episodes on our website, thewww.wine. Today's special guest is Alessia Botturi from yourpartnersinwine.com. That is her website, and you can find all of her information there, as well as on Instagram at Learn Italian Wine Online. Welcome back to The Wonderful World of Wine. Today we have Alessia Botturi with us, who is discussing Italian wine and Italian wine education. So Alessia, you were telling us about how you were here in the United States for 20 years. You went back to Italy and you have started to develop your own programming for wine education and Italian wines. You had mentioned before that, Italian wine is so broad and there are so many regions and grape varieties, and also like how to read the label and the laws and things. How did you go about developing curriculum for such a broad topic, such a topic that has, so much involved in it? Do you have levels? How did you go about thinking about how you were going to approach this?
I'm approaching it in two ways. The first one, as we discussed, is the Italian wine guide that I'm offering complimentary, whoever wants to download it. And it's an overview of all the 20 regions of Italy. I mean, it's a little bit more than overview, maybe because it's really an in-depth analysis of all the 20 regions of Italy, how they are unique, what grape varieties they offer, and their wines. And then the other thing that I'm working on and I'm offering is a really comprehensive online course on Italian history and laws. I noticed that really nobody teaches it. So that's, I think it's a really crucial point when you need to learn Italian wine and really understand Italian wine, to know where we come from, what is our history, our first draft of the Italian laws, and how we came to the complexity really of the laws as they are today. There are really specific reasons for that. So I'm gonna a little bit give like an overview and background on our history, and then get into the analysis of how to understand the structure of the Italian wine laws. We all know that we have the pyramid of the classification, but how is really that structured? I'm going to go into the really details of that. And also there's new laws about subzones and UGA and single vineyards, and now the organic wines and sustainability. These are really like highly regulated categories, and it's a highly regulated market. So my course is really going to give a very in-depth analysis of all these aspects so that people can really grasp and understand Italian wines.
And that seems like a very different perspective or way of going about it, where oftentimes it's the grapes first or the main DOCs, the main DOCGs first, where it's like, okay, we got to teach you about Barolo, Barbaresco, Chianti, Soave, yada, 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 as opposed to from your perspective where you're going to approach it from a different way and talk about like why the labeling laws are the way that they are and kind of get into the nitty gritty of it that way. It's like a different door for Italian wine. And Mark, I know that you've got more Italian certifications than I do because I just sort of dabble in Italian wines and then I go to Italy and I just drink a lot of wine. But I mean, I still know them, but Mark's the one with the Italian certification. So you have experience with a number of different certification programs that don't necessarily do it that way.
Yeah, everybody looks at things differently. And I think that's one of the things I wanted to ask was, I think I asked this to every Italian wine educator we talk to, is how do you talk to a novice wine drinker who drinks only American wines and they see the laws, that they see them on the Italian labels? How do we teach people this is what they are? And is it an indication of quality? What's the most basic way you can explain the Italian laws to our listeners?
Okay, so that's a great question because that's a little bit what I do with my college students that come here to Florence and want to understand a little bit about Italian wine. I mean, the concept of the pyramid, it's a little bit like something that everybody grasp in a way that is visual. So maybe that's a little bit like a starting point to make them understand that the DOCG, the Barolo that they pay $60 or $80 in a shop, it's there is a reason why it's so expensive, because it's really the top, the pinnacle of the pyramid of quality of Italian wines. And then, I mean, there is really not such a like an elevator speech to explain Italian wine. There is a little bit of a background that needs to be given, a little bit about why this area is unique, why it's so much more expensive than just their neighborhood.
Yeah, it seems like you do need to kind of build it up. I think when you start talking about the culture and the terroir and people want to protect things. So I think it kind of brings people into, okay, how are they protecting them? They came up with these laws, but it's just a hard topic for people who only drink or know American wines, because they don't know that there's these things going on in other parts of the world where they're actually doing things and tasting product to make sure it's what it's supposed to be. And that's a big focus in Italy. And I think it's hard for people to grasp that here.
A very quick and easy way to make people understand that, the way I present it is like, it's a sort of a copyright, right?
Yeah.
Let's keep the same example of the Barolo. Barolo is almost like a copyright. They can make it only there with specific way, with a specific grape, only within specific borders, and cannot be replicated anywhere else in the world. Almost like a copyright.
Yeah, it's a good example.
And that's how I talk about champagne too. It's like, I don't use the word copyright, but the Champenois don't like to use the word brand, but it kind of is that. It's like if you have so many overarching things in order to make sure that the reputation and the quality of the wine from that particular place fits into the parameters, then yeah, it's like, okay, this is the reason why we're doing it, so that it is true to the nature of what the wine should be.
Exactly, exactly. And one thing that I always have the wow effect is when I explain that in order to be certified as a DOCG, there is a blind tasting commission that guarantee for you. And it's always something that really appeals to people, especially novice, that they don't know much about Italian wines. They always love this.
I was going to say that you just mentioned it, but it is something that is so unique in the wine world, is this like extra layer of, we're going to taste it and we're going to make sure that it actually does live up to the standards that we're expecting for the style of the wine. Yeah,
exactly. And that gives them okay, then now I'm really tasting, or I'm really buying something special.
So that course is an online course that our listeners can take, and it's at their own pace, correct?
Yes, exactly. It's about 5 hours of course, divided into about 20 small videos, small parts, so they can really pace themselves, take a little bit every day, so that's not going to be overwhelming, because there are a lot of informations that are provided in the course, so it's definitely something that you need to digest a little bit. And you can also jump around. Maybe there is a topic that is on video 10 that interests you the most, so you can jump right into the part that interests you the most, and then go backwards.
So the other question besides Italian laws that I always ask people, Alessia, is a shopping tip. So say one of our listeners walks into a wine shop, they're in the Italian wine section. What are tips that you would give them to look for? What should they be trying to seek out in the Italian section?
It depends on the budget. First of all. And then I would always suggest be adventurous, try something unique, try something you don't know, try something from a region you never heard of. Don't just stick with maybe, the grapes that you know, or the region that you know, because those are, world famous. They're good, and they deliver. But try something that it's a little bit more off the beaten path. That's the beauty of Italian wines. It's you will never be able to taste all the wines of Italy. So, try and maybe you will be surprised.
Yeah, I always give that advice. And unfortunately, I feel the white wines of Italy don't get any respect here. It's all about Prosecco, it's all about Pinot Grigio, and everything else for a white grape from Italy is really a hard sell. It's a hand sell to
which is
push to
too
people.
bad, because there's so much. Like, that's my go-to for keeping stuff in my house for white wines with dinner, is have something Italian, because it doesn't even matter what the grape variety is. I hate to say that, but like you could have 12 different bottles from 12 different grape varieties from all across the country and put them in the fridge, have them with dinner. It's going to be so good, because they are just so food friendly and so just easy to love. I feel like, for Italian white grapes. And my family and I were in Italy in February. I know a lot about Italian wine, but everywhere we went, I asked the recommendation of whoever was working at the restaurant, like, okay, this is what we're all going to order. What do you recommend off of the wine list? And we were so pleasantly surprised by so many different things, to just try something new. And I think that when people, especially in the United States, are ordering wine or buying wine, it's a scary thing. Like, people don't want to take a risk, I guess, with buying something that they don't understand. And the variety and the breadth of Italian grape varieties and regions can be very intimidating, I feel like, to people. But there's so much to love, especially when you take that risk. I'm kind of with the both of you. It's like, take a chance, take a risk, try something you've never had before, a region, a grape. You probably will be pleasantly surprised, but because it'll probably remind you of something else that you already love. And there's a lot out there to try.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other thing is that, but at this point, all the wines that have been poured imported has always also been reviewed by the most important wine reviewers or the most important wine magazines. So really, there is this comfort zone that can be also given to the customer if really they are afraid to try something new.
That's a
Somebody
really
else already
excellent point.
vouched.
Yeah, that like there are reviews out there for a whole lot of these things. So that's super smart that just look them up and other people will sort of give you that idea of comfort or of safety that
Right.
these wines actually do taste really good.
Exactly. So Italy is much more than Prosecco and Pinot Grigio.
Yes. So, Lisa, I wanted to ask you, you recently posted something bringing up the topic of de-alcoholized wine in Italy. And all the courses that I've taken focusing on Italian wine, never has it been mentioned to me about non-alcoholic wine in Italy. And I wanted to see if you could tell us, are there laws regulating that? Is it acceptable in Italy? I'm trying to think of what's the term for non-alcohol? Vino. What's the Italian
Zero
wine?
alcohol. So zero alcohol.
Zero alcohol. Can you just tell our listeners what's the status with that in Italy? Is it acceptable law now that's going to allow it in all these regions?
Yeah, so that's a great point because this is evolving and we have some really very recent updates. So the European Union and Italy obviously just approved that the alcoholized wine is actually legal and can be actually called wine. Before, the laws were stating that wine had to have a certain percentage of alcohol in order to be defined wine by law. Now the laws are changing and they changed. They just approved it. So zero alcohol wine or de-alcoholized wine is regulated and it's considered wine. So there are specific processes that the wineries can use in order to basically take wine out of the equation, and those are also regulated. It's in all effect, it's the law has been approved, and zero alcohol wine is a reality. And I started seeing in some wine shops around here in Florence that they start offering zero alcohol wines to their customers.
Are we going to see zero alcohol Chianti or Barolos? I mean, are they that acceptable?
I think so, because in the last year or two, really we had a dip in the wine consumption and wine export. So I think that a lot of wineries, in order to maintain their export numbers or their sales really active, they need to adapt to the market. So we're gonna start seeing even maybe like a Brunello, no alcohol. I cannot
Wow.
imagine how it's gonna be, but I think
Yeah.
start seeing those.
So is this a worldwide market trend with this lower alcohol, no alcohol thing? Because I kind of thought it was only the United States, but no, this is like everywhere.
No, it's everywhere. And,
Oh, goodness.
just talking about my Italian experience here, they are really scaring people with driving under the alcohol influence, and they
Yeah.
are the limit below the US.
Mm-hmm.
So people are really don't really want to drink much anymore. And
Yeah. I
I
knew
see.
that was an Italian thing. I know it's a very low in Scotland. Like you can't even go out and have a scotch and then drive because you'll be above the limit. So yeah. Oh, that's so interesting.
It started with the cocktails, the mocktails that we also see here in Italy, and now with wine, and it's going fast. You know, this trend is really picking up really fast.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Is that because of like here lately, the past few months, the World Health Organization, all this talk about the health of the wine has come up and has had a major impact. Do you think that is what's happening in Italy as well?
I think it's a little bit about this new driving laws and a little bit like, just people drink less.
Mm-hmm.
People started drinking less wine.
Which
Maybe
is
it's all
a
the
trend that
cost.
we've seen in Europe, of course, the last generation.
Yes,
So
yes, exactly. I think it started with those like canned beverages that were low in alcohol, and that's that's really expanded to all the alcoholic beverages.
So, having spent time in LA and in America, you've obviously seen issues with Kim and I talk about a lot about the big brands, how like 90% of things on store shelves here are big brands. Is that something that is the same in Italy? Like, are there big brands on the shelf that are Italian brands that take over, or is it still more the small family wineries that sell the most in Italy?
There is a little bit of both. There are a lot of wine shops. It's really a lot. Almost like every neighborhood has its own wine shop. So depending on where you go, you can find the big brands or the small guys. The big difference here, I would say, Italians still tend to drink a regional. So here in Tuscany, you find mostly Tuscan wines. So you can find the big Tuscan names in a shop and little like small Italian wineries like mom and pop winery that are represented in another shop. So there is really everything, but regional. It's a regional focus. So
You,
very little Piedmont wine, for example, here.
and you don't see like Gallo on the shelves, correct? Or Saint Michel or anything like that.
Or like the Italian equivalent of Saint Michel, right?
No, there are some, like, let's say here in Tuscany, talking about Tuscany, we see some really big names in the Tuscan producers, and they are in a lot of restaurants, in a lot of shops, but really not everywhere. You find all the producers really represented.
One of the shows Kim and I just did was focusing on wines on vacation. And one of the most common questions we get is people go to Italy and they come back and they say, I never got a wine headache. Do you get that question asked to you often of why can I go to Italy,
By
drink
English
wine?
speakers.
I guess it's yes, I got that question a lot actually now that I think about, and it's probably because our wine is made more natural. We are not allowed to use any acids. We are not allowed to correct the wine in any way. We are not allowed to add tannins. We are not allowed until recently to de-alcoholize. Our wines are not manipulated. So that's probably the reason why you don't get a headache when you come here to Italy and drink maybe twice as much as when you're in US.
What other what like most popular questions you get about Italian wine when you're teaching people your course or your private sessions? What's the most common question you get?
People always ask about the Super Tuscan. They always want to know about that.
Like, what is a Super Tuscan? What is the labeling? Like that kind of a question?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, they don't understand what a Super Tuscan really is, so they want to understand. And that's another example how you need to give them a story, the story back up in order to explain them what a Super Tuscan is. And then they don't understand what is the Franciacorta, for example. So where before we were talking about champagne, and they don't understand how we can do a champagne here in Italy, but we don't call it champagne, but it's something special as well. So a lot of like confusing questions. That's what I get.
So the last thing I have to ask you is pronunciation. Prosecco or Prosecco?
Prosecco.
Prosecco. Every time I ask this question, I've seen shows where people say that the correct way is Prosecco, and I've never heard any Italians say it that way.
No, it's Prosecco.
Okay.
And the big one also that I always get is Sangiovese, not Sangiovese.
Sangiovese, yeah.
Sangiovese.
Yeah.
You say Sangiovese.
Because it ends in an
Yeah,
E, not an I.
So great. And I encourage our listeners to go to Alessia's website, yourpartnersinwine.com. She offers that free download guide, which is excellent. And she also has her current Italian wine history and laws class you can take. And it's in euros on your site. Is it about 175 American dollars, Alessia?
So it's 129 euro. So yeah, it translates for roughly 150.
So great value to understand and get a different perspective. That's what I love about programs like yours, to get a different view other than the Wine Scholar Guild, which we talk about, or Vin Italy's program, or the North American Sommelier. You have your own take, having looked at all those and put together your own program. So encourage the listeners to really take a dive and look at that for you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Well, thank you for joining us. Kim, did you
Yes,
have anything
thanks.
else? Or
No, this was a wonderful conversation, and so nice to get the perspective from somebody who has spent time in the United States and time in Italy, so knowledgeable, but understanding of the sort of educational needs of people on both sides of the pond and what people are really curious about when it comes to Italian wine and the kinds of things that it is important and interesting for students to learn about.
Awesome. It was a pleasure to meet both of you, and thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for being here.
thank you for listening to us today on The Wonderful World of Wine. We've been your hosts, Mark Lenzi and Kim Simone, exploring all things wine with you. Today's special guest is Alessia Botturi. Her website is yourpartnersinwine.com. You can find her on Instagram at Learn Italian Wine Online. Our program is supported by Franklin Public Radio. Our website is thewww.wine. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at The Wonderful World of Wine. Our past episodes are on SoundCloud and iTunes. Cheers.
Cheers.
Wine, wine, wine.